You need to talk to your wife about the domestic economy and the practicalities of your life together for about 90 minutes a week. And you need to date at least once a week for that length of time, or maybe twice if you can manage that. And if you don't do that, you will become isolated and lonely, and you'll develop a backlog of communication. And if you don't fix that, you'll end up divorced, and then you'll be fixing it for the rest of your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And whenever, man, backlog of communication, I love that. I love that idea, as though I'm just putting rocks in a backpack, and eventually that backpack's going to wear me down if I don't have a regular practice of communication. And again, somehow this became a moral or characterological issue. I think it's the skills issue, man. I think taking some of the drama and smoke out of it and just saying, I don't know how to tell you, wife. I've never seen it done. I didn't see it at my house growing up. I've never seen it. I don't know how to do this. So I want to practice once a week. Let's go over our calendar. Let's go over our budget. Like, how are we going to spend money this week? And let's practice. I'm going to try to tell you what I need this week. About 5 years ago, my marriage was, we were hanging on by a spider's web, just hanging on. And so my wife and I realized we got to, if we're going to hang on to this thing, we're going to have to rebuild it out of ash, right? And I can't tell you, I'm a 6'2", 195 pound, I lived in Texas my whole life, Texas male. What it took for me to look across the table and tell my wife, I just occasionally want you to tell me that you're proud of me. That was a hard thing for me to say. And I didn't even realize how desperately I'd been searching for her approval for the first 15 years we'd been married, and how much I kept going out on a limb and on a limb and on a limb. And I was taking her non-response as rejection, and I never put my needs out there. And I was embarrassed and ashamed to say it. And then she said, man, that would have been super helpful 15 years ago. And now she makes it a regular practice of our marriage to say, hey, I see you, and I appreciate what you're doing for our family. Golly, what a gift. And I didn't know that doing the dishes was akin to foreplay. Great. Yep. I will knock those dishes out all day long. It's about practicing saying your needs out loud. And then, man, get out of your head. The number of hours I've spent researching workout programs when I could have just gone to work out, or researching how to tell your wife instead of just telling her. What a waste of time. We have too much data, man. We have too much information. We need to go act.
Well, you can have a preliminary conversation with your partner, let's say, and say something like, look, we need to tell each other what we need and want. And we're both too stupid to do that because we don't really know what we need and want. And we have almost no practice at it. And worse, here's something about that that's really quite sad and frightening, is like, if one of the things you wanted to hear is that your wife was grateful to you for, let's say, providing properly for the family, so say proud of you, there's a part of you that's quite insecure that wants that message, and you're vulnerable on that point. And so then if you share that vulnerability, the person with whom you're sharing it knows exactly where to stick you if they want. And so it takes real trust to do that. But the alternative is assuming that, and people do this all the time, they'll say things like, well, if you loved me, you'd know what I wanted. It's like, well, first of all, that's a pretty perfect love. And second,
I'm not clairvoyant, right? Yeah.
Well, right. Well, you're not even smart enough to do that for yourself most of the time, for someone else. And so, you can make an agreement with your partner and say, look, here's something I'd like to hear you say, and here's the words I'd like to hear. Will you just say that? Another person might object, and they'll say, well, that sounds false if I do it, or it won't be real because we're just practicing it and it's artificial. And then you think, well, wait a second, we're going to be together for the next 10,000 days. And if it takes, or more, and if it takes 20 stupid practices to get it right, that's not so much stacked up over 10,000 days. And it might be with many marriages, I would say there's probably 10 things that each person wants to hear on a quasi-regular basis that would make the difference between the marriage succeeding and the marriage failing. But it means you have to sit down with your partner and say, look, we should decide jointly what we need and want, and we should have enough courage to try to express ourselves stupidly in the attempt to get it. And then allow ourselves to make mistakes, while we're practicing.
I love that. I find that we've become goal obsessed. And so if I want to do these things so that I can keep my marriage, I find that I end up way out on a limb. I find out by chasing somewhere I don't want to go. I find it more valuable to say, I want to live a life that is not chasing happiness, because that's just cocaine and cotton candy, but I want to chase a life of joy. And all of the data tells me a good marriage, a good connection with the romantic, intimate partner over a long period of time is the best bet I have in maximizing joy. And so if I'm going to do that, that means I've got to be awkward. And by the way, if you can stand in front of somebody naked and say, do you see me? And do you think I'm beautiful? Do you want to join bodies with me? Surely you can say, hey, when I see dishes in the sink, it makes me feel like I'm not being the romantic partner. I feel like I'm less of a wife because I've created this narrative in my head that this is what a perfect wife does or a perfect husband does. Can you help with the dishes? Good gosh, you can stand in front of somebody naked and say, here I am. Surely you can say, hey, can you help with the dishes, right? And then we have to stop being so looking for people coming at us. What's that great saying? Whatever you go looking for in the world, you're sure to find. Start receiving that feedback as an invitation, not as you've been screwing this up, right? Because my wife could have heard that, me saying, hey, I just want you to say you're proud of me every once in a while, as me throwing a grenade, right? You're failing me because you're not doing these things. She took it as, here's an invitation. Here's a way you can love me better. And what a gift, man. What a gift.
Yeah, well, we got to
get over ourselves, man.
You can help people box those sorts of things in too by saying, look, let's make this discussion about the smallest thing possible, right? Yeah. We're not opening up Pandora's box and assessing the validity of our entire marriage. We're going to try to get one small thing slightly better. And we're going to assume that lots of things are going well. And so we're going to sit down for 90 minutes a week. Maybe that's not all at once. And we're going to share what's on our minds. And we're going to talk about what we would like to see happen and how we would respond positively to that. And we're not going to leap to the conclusion that that's a generic criticism of the whole marriage. This is partly also why people don't have these conversations, especially when they have developed a backlog of communication. So my wife and I had a rule too, which was, well, we had a couple of rules that helped us along with this to not have the backlog. And one of the rules was, don't agree to anything that you don't agree to. Because the last thing I wanted to hear 5 years down the road after we had embarked on a particular pathway was, well, I didn't really want to do that, but I just went along with it because I thought you wanted to. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do about that now? That was 5 years ago and we talked about it and I didn't want you to agree because you thought it was easier to agree. I wanted a consensus, and the corollary to that was if we're going to talk about something that needs to be addressed now and that will be fixed in the future, we don't get to drag up the past. Because that's another thing that happens, right? Is you start talking about things that are problematic and one person or the other goes, well, you always act like this, you've always acted like this, and there's no chance in the future that you're ever going to change. It's like, well, instantly you're in a fight because your whole character, past, present, and future, has just been savaged. When the conversation should be something like, our meal times might go 15% better if after you were done eating and we had all finished, you brought your dishes to the sink and rinsed them off and put them in the dishwasher. And here's what I'm willing to do in return for that.